Thank you for listening to the Speaking Out on Sex Abuse podcast with host Clara and Jimmy Hinton. If you're new to the podcast, please subscribe and share so you never miss an episode. Search for us on your favorite podcast app, or you can find the podcast on jimmyhinton.org and findingahealingplace.com. Please rate our show, subscribe, and share so we can spread the word. If you would like to support us and get exclusive rewards, go to patreon.com/speakingout. Find a tier that best fits you and join as a patron of the podcast. Now let's get into the show. Welcome to this week's podcast with host Jimmy Hinton.
And Jimmy's mom, Clara.
And we have a special guest.
We do.
Mendy Hicks. Mendy, welcome.
Hi.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So Mendy got put on my radar by another one of our guests, by Megan Benninger.
Mm-hmm.
And you had spoken with Megan, and she said, hey, you need to meet this lady. She said, I talked to her, and she said there's this big lawsuit with the SBC, with the church, with your abuser, and all the people who covered it up. And that kind of caught my attention because first of all, that's unusual to sue that many people. And the other thing is, that's an indication that, man, you told a lot of people. A lot of people screwed this up.
Wow.
Yeah.
So we'll let you tell your story and just give us a little bit of your background and how this led to a lawsuit against your abuser, the SBC, and the individuals that covered up the abuse.
What happened to me was when I was 13, we went on a youth trip and he fondled me.
And this was your youth pastor?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I was in the school, like we had dorms. And so there was swinging doors from the dorm to the bathroom. I was in the bathroom. I laid out in the sun like 8 hours that day or the day before. And if you can't tell, I'm white as a ghost. So that led to sun poisoning. Mm-hmm. Well, I was in the bathroom with one of the people in the lawsuit. Her name's Jane Barrett. And she was going to put some ointment down there on my bikini area. And he walked in the room through the double doors and said, Jane, you go with the youth group. I'll take care of Mindy. Mm-hmm. So that's what happened to me.
First of all, that's insanity that she left you alone with a grown man. Well, Let me back up. First of all, what was her position?
She was at the time, she was just a church secretary.
Yeah. So that's insanity that she was going to do this to you.
Right. Yeah.
That's something that you call a nurse or a doctor or somebody who's equipped to do it. And you say, we're going to have you looked at. We're going to have you checked out.
Right.
I mean, my daughter she got sun poisoning when we were in Haiti back in 2019. So she was 8 years old, almost 9. Mm-hmm. And we went with good friends of ours, and the wife, good friend of ours, she's a nurse.
Right.
I didn't even look at my daughter because I'm not equipped to.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I had her give her opinion, and then we had her checked out by more nurses, by Haitian nurses.
Right.
Yeah, this whole thing was botched from the very beginning. So go on. I'm sorry. Yeah, that just bothers me.
So I didn't really. He was always real grabby, like from the front. Does that make sense? Like he was a very handsy person.
Mm-hmm.
So I told when I was 15 years old, and my dad was a deacon. We were very active in that church. My dad had a meeting with Jimmy, and then had a meeting with the deacons, and they said that I was possessed by a demon and I had to go to a mental hospital.
Wow.
Oh my word.
I was there for 14 days. And he was, while I was packing to go to the mental hospital, he was actually sitting on my daybed as I was packing.
Your abuser was.
Right.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
So how was he able to convince everybody that you were mentally unstable? Because this story, I mean, this has been replicated over and over and over. And I hear this a lot, especially in the charismatic churches, where victims are often told that they're demon possessed, that they need to pray more, that they need to pray that the devil leaves them. That's incredibly common with sexual abuse.
Yeah.
So how was he able to convince people that essentially you were in need of having a mental breakdown or whatever, and in need of this help?
Because after it all happened, I started acting out. I don't really remember exactly. I do remember I started cutting. That's when all that started, but I don't exactly remember exact incidences. I just remember I was acting out. So that gave them cause to say, she obviously has a 2-year background because it happened when I was 13. I told when I was 15. In between those 2 years, I started cutting and I started acting out. Very depressed, tried to commit suicide, just all that stuff. So he was able to convince them that I had a demon in me, which is very odd for a Southern Baptist church to ever bring forth to begin with.
Right.
Our pastors, ministers, youth ministers, anybody that works with the church are not qualified to cast out demons.
Right. Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. I mean, that's kind of similar to if in our circles, if we claim demon possession, that's just incredibly uncommon and rare. Just bizarre.
I can't imagine, Mindy, what you were going through during that 2-year period of just your whole mindset, what it must have been to bring you to the point of where you were cutting, where you were so depressed, you were suicidal, all those things. And then to be told you were demon possessed on top of it, and to be led to a mental hospital. I honestly can't imagine what you've been through. I really can't.
I mean, the whole situation sucks itself.
Right.
Yeah.
I think, Jimmy, you read the complaint. I wish that Nikki would have joined us, because her story, I don't know if you read all of it. If I sent it all to you, I've got it here in front of me.
You did. Her story, we both read it.
I read through it all too.
Yeah. Her story is 10 times worse than what happened to me. And there's other victims, but they won't come forward.
Yeah. And what happened to you was horrific.
It was.
I mean, I'm not going to share the details here. It's not my story, but it was an absolute horrific, abusive nightmare. I mean, absolutely
it was
awful, traumatizing.
Yeah.
So who all did you tell? You told multiple people. So it's not like this was like Alex came and told me and you, and that was pretty much it.
That was it.
And that led to us immediately reporting. You didn't do that. I mean, we reported within 48 hours.
Yep, it was.
We were in the police station, and that's only because it was the weekend and the police station was closed.
Right.
You told multiple people.
Yep. I told my dad. I told all of the deacons. I told every teacher that I ever had from 7th to 12th grade. I told every guy that I dated. I mean, my story hasn't changed.
Yeah.
I actually dated. This is one of the crazy parts about it. One of the investigators that was on our case, I dated him when I was 16 years old, and he knew about it.
Wow.
So 3 years ago, when Nikki and I decided that we were going to press charges, we went into the sheriff's department, and what is that man that's like over the deputies? Like he's the main guy.
Be the county sheriff is
chief,
is the top dog.
Or there's a chief deputy and then the sheriff. Yeah.
Well, I think that we talked to the district attorney, and the only reason why I think that is because he looks like that cartoon character that wears the cowboy hat and the boots.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
He was behind us as we were walking into this conference room. And he said, we've been waiting for y'all to come forward. We've had, multiple complaints about this guy over the past couple of years. And I turned around and I looked him square in the face and I said, you have known about this since I was 15. Mm-hmm. Don't go there with me.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
Wow.
That's awful.
Yeah.
It is awful.
Law enforcement knew, the Board of Education knew about it. Everyone in our county knew.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And nobody did anything.
Nope.
Nobody supported you. Nobody did anything. Instead, mm-hmm. I feel like you were brought to the center of this circle that was drawn around you and called pretty much crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
So how did this lead to the lawsuit?
That's where Nikki's story kind of comes in, because that's when we both found out about each other. I was a nurse at a doctor's office, and I got a phone call one day, and I was looking at an MRI with two physicians. So I was in the middle, looking at the screen. I had one doctor on the left side, one doctor on the right side. And they said, Mindy, you got a call on whatever line. So I picked it up. And this girl named Christy, and I don't know if I can get out and give her last name or not, said, hey, Mindy, I just need to know if Jimmy Beasy molested you or not.
Wow.
I got two doctors right here.
Wow. That's like...
I said, I can't have this conversation right now.
Right.
And so I just hung up the phone.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then Nikki reached out to me, and basically we made the agreement that we would not, this is years ago. This was maybe like 6 years ago is when this happened. We would not press charges if he left the church and did not go back into ministry at all.
Mm-hmm.
He did that. He told the church that he was leaving. And then a couple of years ago, Jane Barrett, who's the same person that left me alone with him when I was 13, called Nikki and said, Jimmy and his family are going through a hard time. You know that they've got 3 children in college, and I just want to know if it's okay with you if he takes a position at First Baptist Church, Clanton, Alabama. And Nikki said, you've got to be kidding me. No, I'm not okay with it. And then Jane said, well, it should have never been brought up to begin with. And Nikki just hung up the phone. And then we found out that he was a minister at First Baptist Church, Clanton, Alabama. And then that's when we decided that we were going to stick to our guns and press charges.
Yeah.
Good.
You know what blows my mind about this? Because this is, this is repeated over and over and over and over
mm-hmm.
again. And first of all, I'm going to say for our listeners, because some people may hear this and be like, well, why wouldn't you press charges? Why would you let him off the hook? Why would you, make this kind of a agreement? Aren't you making a deal with the devil? People have no idea how awful it is going through the legal system. It is.
It's been complete hell.
Right.
Well, yes, but it is expensive, but it has been, the past 3 years have been complete and utter hell on Nikki and I.
Yeah.
My parents have paid for our attorney. Nikki and I have the same attorneys. So my parents paid for, our attorneys. It's just been utter hell.
Yeah, it is. It's emotionally exhausting. It takes its toll on you to go through the legal system. And in the end, there's not even close to a guarantee that
Nope.
the charges are going to be pressed in the end anyway, or that the charges are going to stick. So, it's just, and like you said, 3 years long. I mean, that's a heck of a long process.
It's all consuming, isn't it? It's just, it just consumes every part of your life. And, and you have to relive this over and over and over again. Do you ever feel like the questions that you've had to answer, you begin to doubt yourself, you doubt the timeline, you doubt, that's awesome.
No.
That's good. Some people say, oh my gosh, everything's so muddied up now, with when the legal system enters, that I can't remember day one from day 3 and day 45. My
story has never changed. Plus, I have this on my side. I have been writing in a journal ever since I was 10 years old.
That is
so
smart.
That has everything that happened.
Wow.
Timeline of when it happened. Every person I told, I've always kept.
Wow.
Good records of that.
Wow. That's fantastic.
That is incredibly important. Yeah.
Wow. Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the other side of this too is, it's so frustrating for me because I see this over and over where these pastors who are abusers, they molest, they full on rape, they can basically do whatever they want. They kind of get called onto the carpet, a little bit, like a little slap on the wrist. And then they jump right back into ministry as if that's the only job on the face of the planet that they're capable of doing. And that's absolute and utter nonsense. And the church buys it just like that. Oh, he has a family to support. Okay, great. I'm sympathetic to that. As a family of an abuser, I'm sympathetic to that. But there are other jobs out there other than ministry. There are jobs that pay much better than ministry. I know, I'm in ministry. The pay is awful.
I don't think it's about the pay, though, is it, Mindy?
It's
not.
The pay is not what
it's
keeps them
not
there.
about, right.
Unless they're like a high profile,
right,
really well-known pastor that, is a celebrity pastor, then it just gets bizarre. But, your average pay for preaching ministers is garbage. That is not why we go into ministry.
I think it's just such a slap in the face repeatedly when you hear of him going back into ministry, ignoring what he knows is the truth, totally defying it, making light of it, making you out to look like somebody that you're not, and then to go into ministry. And it's a mockery of what he's doing. It's a mockery of a representation of God and God's work. And that, I think, is probably the biggest disservice that a person in his position can do. Just awful. And yet people buy into it. They just buy into it. It just, it blows me away. It really does. Just blows me away.
So I think I know your answer to this. We haven't talked before the show, so I don't know, but I'm pretty sure I know how you answer. So the SBC, I mean, not just them, but the Independent Baptist Church, the Catholic Church, on and on and on. There have been these explosive reports. They've been all over the news. Do you think that them being in the public eye for the last, 2018 is really when it got ramped up? So we're talking 3 years. Yeah, 4 years.
Yeah.
They have really been in the public eye. All these different denominations. Do you think that they're starting to get it, that maybe we shouldn't be harboring abusers in the church?
No. As far as the SBC goes, no. There is no accountability whatsoever. In our SBC, there are no mandated reporter laws in the state of Alabama for anybody in ministry. No, I think our story is just getting swept under the rug, and we're just one of the many.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I happen to agree with you. I've been doing this for 10 years now. There are pockets of churches that that do get it. I do consulting with churches, and some of these churches they blow me away. I mean, in a good way. They're incredible. Yeah. They're responsible. They're level-headed. They're wise. They make good decisions. They want help, which is why they seek somebody to consult with.
Right.
There are a handful of churches that get it. With that said, I'm really discouraged when I look at where we are after 10 years of advocating, and you're like, this has been all over the news. I mean, you have everything from USA Gymnastics, the Larry Nassar case that was so much in the public eye. Jerry Sandusky, Jared Fogle from Subway, the Subway spokesman, Bill Cosby. I mean, we could go on and on and on. Weinstein, on and on and on and on. I mean, this has been Matt Lauer, for crying out loud. It's been everywhere, right? Yeah. Everywhere. It's not slowing down.
I know this is a comment I've made to you privately before, and I'll say it again. Until the mindset of being in the good old boys club ends, where I cover for you and you cover for me, because after all, we were young when this happened and we didn't know better. And, you know, we all have done stuff, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And everybody covers for everybody until that mindset ends and there is an accountability. It'll continue on just like what's happening, because it is a good old boys club, whether we like to say it or not. And it really is, it sickens me. It truly does. That man that did that to you should have been called out on the carpet immediately. He needed to become accountable for what he did. Instead, they had a deacons meeting, and you were the one called on the carpet. You were the underage girl suffering the results of what happened. And look what happened. And it's wrong. It's just so wrong.
Well, and the predictability factor too. Did they accuse you of trying to destroy the image of the church?
Not at that point. At that point, they just said that I was trying to destroy him.
Yeah, sure. A perfectly good man's family and his reputation and all that. I mean, it's this kind of stuff it's so predictable that it's maddening. I mean, it's the same responses that are repeated over and over and over, and the victim blaming. It's got to stop. It has got to stop, because it destroys people. I mean, it legitimately wrecks people's lives. When you go to the people who should be protecting you, they turn on you, and instead you're the one who's hospitalized.
Right.
I mean, if anything's insane, it's not Mendy. It's all of them. Right. I mean, that's not how you treat victims of abuse ever. And it's replicated over and over and over again. So we do have church leaders, just probably a small number who listen to this podcast. But there are people out there who legitimately, they want to learn. They want to know how to handle abuse allegations properly. What would your message be to the church leaders who are listening? Put them in the chairs of the people who you told. How would you want them to respond?
They need to believe the victim. And if you don't believe the victim, it's going to come out one way or the other, and you will be held accountable. That's how, my blog was born. I'm still in the techie series of it, but I have over 50 people's stories in my inbox right now waiting to be published.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I like that you said the truth eventually will come out. It always does, doesn't it? It does.
Oh yeah. And we as victims are going to come after you. If we can't hold you criminally liable or civilly liable, then I'm going to spread your name as much as I possibly can. And my attorney said that was okay for me to do that. If they try to sue me for slander, at least that'll get me in front of a damn judge.
Right. This is interesting too, because we talk about that a lot on this podcast, that people feel like they're only their only course of action is to report to the police. And if that falls flat, then they're like,
They
we
just
don't
give
know
up.
what else we can do. Or
Give
go to the
up.
church
Yeah.
leaders.
Yeah.
We went to the church leaders and they shut us down and they put us in our place and there's nothing more we can do. That's just not true. There's a
No.
lot more that you can do. I think that people should recognize that they're empowered. I mean, look at what Megan and Dominic Benning are
Yeah,
doing.
yeah.
You know, they started a
Right.
database that lists almost 1,000 abusers in the Baptist church. I mean,
Yeah.
they have so much power just to get people's stories out there and expose the church and say, look, these people are in the church. They have criminal charges. These are abusers who are known abusers. This is what they did. You know, and I always tell people, think about not the fact that these people are warped and twisted enough to think about doing these things to little children. They actually did it.
They've done it. Yep. Mm-hmm.
You know, we're not talking about criminal wannabes. We're talking about criminals, actual criminals that legitimately followed through to the very end. They carried these crimes out on innocent children over and over, on multiple victims, and they're hiding in the church. And the church is giving them cover. So, yeah, I mean, I think people need to realize, and this is encouraging to me to hear, that, you know, you and Nikki stood up and you were like, we're not rolling over. We're not going to take no for an answer. We're not going to let this guy go back into ministry, you know, again and hide under the radar. It's not going to happen.
Right.
So, you know, I'm really encouraged by that, because I think people have so much more power than they
realize.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I think, you know, this has only been in the past week where I was praying and God put it on my heart to start a blog. But my whole thing is to give victims a safe platform to tell their story. They are more than welcome to remain anonymous. They don't have to name names. I, on the other hand, name everybody's name. I have uploaded my entire civil suit. I blocked out Nikki's last name. She asked me to do that. But yeah, I don't care. I've been telling this whole story since I was 15 years old. No one has ever been able to shut me up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they sure as hell ain't gonna do it now.
I love that.
I know. And I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, it is.
And that's the thing. Like in the
big encouragement
in the church,
to others. Yeah.
people like you you're shamed. You're told that you're bitter, you're angry, that you have a chip on your shoulder, that you're not forgiving, and on and on and on and on. And what they don't realize is that all that you're looking to do is to protect more innocent people from having happened to them what happened to you.
Right.
That's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's not about vengeance and money and getting even and, you know, all this stuff. It's too exhausting. Right?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, if you wanted revenge, you'd slash tires or, you know, do something that's
I still
quick.
think people take abuse too lightly, Mindy, unless it's happened to them. I think it's easy to hear a story, and unless there is some kind of a personal something there, it's easy to just turn your head and say, well, you know, she's 13, she got through it, she went on, became a nurse, or blah, 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 you know. And it's easy to just kind of turn it off, so to speak.
Yeah.
But to the abused survivor, there's no way you ever turn it completely off. It's there.
Yeah.
That abuse is there, and it gnaws, and it just is a sad part of who you are now, you know, who we are now. I know in listening to my daughter, when she spoke on the podcast, it was a decade, 10 years later, and she spoke about things like being suicidal and what she has been through. But she also reminded all of us that that's a daily task, keeping herself set on course so that she doesn't sink down to that place again. Abuse does that. It leaves a permanent hole. Where there should have been joy, there's terror and fright and, you know, all the mistrust and all these things that mold and shape us that should have been good are bad. And for people to just kind of turn their heads or to say, why don't you forgive and forget? Why don't you, let go of it? You can't.
And why would you?
Yeah, right.
Why?
Well, that's what I mean.
Yeah. I mean,
right.
why give free passes to the person who unapologetically not only did what he did to you, and I assume, you can tell us, did he ever apologize for what he did to you?
He did not ever apologize to what he did to me, but he did to Nikki.
Yeah. But apologies fall pretty flat. Right now, the nation's watching the case of Gabby,
Right.
who disappeared, and they just found what they think is her remains. They'll positively identify. But there you have somebody. If you watch the footage, I just watched the full body cam footage, and this guy, Brian, he's apologizing, the boyfriend, he's apologizing to the police. And, oh, I'm so sorry that you got called out to this. And that apology's completely empty. It's null and void because there's a dead woman now.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Apologies, in my opinion, apologies don't mean anything if there's not actual fruits that stem forth from
Right.
that.
Right.
The apology. Right.
So, one of those actions would be to honor your request not to go back into ministry.
Right.
Well, he definitely didn't do that.
No. And in fact, it was a big screw you to you and Nikki. Like, who are you to tell me that I can't go back into ministry? And I think you guys probably surprised him a little bit when he was served with a lawsuit.
Yeah. Ultimately, he got out of it, though.
Yeah.
We went in front of grand jury, which the people involved at the DA's office and how much they're involved in this particular case is ridiculous. One of the DA's husbands was a deacon at the church that he was now pastoring.
Wow.
One of the DAs is a musician on the side. My ex-husband is a musician, so they know each other. I dated the investigator. Everything is just intertwined in all of this.
How is that even possible? Because I know
I have no idea.
Really.
So here's an example. I talked to Kelly Callahan, the district attorney, and she was the district attorney in Cambria County, who first handled the allegations when they first came forward about this abuse in the Catholic Church. It was, in fact, Sean Doherty. We interviewed Sean a couple times on the podcast. Sean was friends with the district attorney. They were childhood friends. She recused herself just because of that. She said, I cannot take this case in my county because I know Sean, the victim who came forward.
Right.
No, they were able to have free reign.
That's crazy.
I know.
Wow.
That's
you talk about wrong from day one.
Yeah. Justice is not blind.
Yeah.
That's a major conflict of interest.
It is. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's a shame. Well, okay, here's a question. Is he still serving at that church, or is he gone now?
No, he apparently during all this time he was having affairs with people, with older consenting adults in the church. So his wife moved to Gulf Shores, and she's the principal at a high school in Gulf Shores. So he stayed here, and he was pastoring at that First Baptist Clanton. And then when all of this stuff, like the criminal stuff, started, there was a deal made behind Nikki and I's back that was basically his attorney and the DA, and he had to leave the county. And they wouldn't criminally charge him with anything.
Wow.
So do you know where he is now? Like what he's doing? Is he back at a church?
No, he's not back at a church. I have Google alerts on his name, and I check every day.
Yeah.
He's not back at a church.
Yeah, not yet.
Yeah, not yet.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, you said that you have multiple survivors who are coming forward. They're sharing their stories with you. What's your message to them, to survivors who are listening to this podcast? We have, probably on average weeks, anywhere from 1,000 to 2,000 people that listen.
Right.
What's your message to survivors? Because a lot of people have experienced this, and I think they just feel so shut down and defeated. What's your message to them?
It's okay to feel defeated, but ultimately you're not. There are people out there that believe your story. Reach out to people who are advocating for, victims. They can direct you, in which way you need to handle things. They can contact me through my blog. I'm more than willing to help get them in touch with you or get them entered into the database with Dominic. Yeah. There are people out there who believe you no matter how crazy the story may sound.
Yeah.
Because mine sounds insane. So, find an advocate, even if it's online. Join Facebook groups. If you don't want to name names, don't do it. If you're not comfortable telling all of your story, then tell part of it.
Mm-hmm.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that because not everybody's in a place emotionally where they can tell all of the story, but they need to at least tell some of it. And I hear screaming all through what you're saying, get support. It's out there. Support is out there.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it doesn't just have to be in the form of going to see, quote unquote, a psychiatrist or a therapist.
Right.
There are people like y'all, like myself, who advocate for victims.
Right.
So they don't have to go see a therapist, or they don't have, because I see a therapist, but she doesn't get it like the Behringers do.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. Many do not. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lot different when you're speaking to someone that's been in the muck of it.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. It's too easy for others to just make light of something that is not light. It's heavy stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Let us know. You can say it now, what your website is. We'll put it in the comments, and then you can email it to me. I'll make sure that we get it all spelled right and put that in the description of this podcast so people can find your website and reach out to you. But what's your site?
It's www.mybrokenhalo.org.
Okay.
I love that. And I love the fact that you have created a tool for others to use to help in their healing.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
That's the big encouragement too.
Mm-hmm.
Even though abuse is rampant, the church continues to get it wrong. We're still out there speaking. We will do it as long as there's breath in us. And I think it is making a difference. I really do. It's slow. And we're moving the needle though. But on the victim support side, I'm super encouraged at how many people, how many survivors like you are just taking initiative, and you're like, man, I'm going to reach out and I'm going to help people. And you already said 50 people have given their story. And
it's only been in the past 4 days.
That's awesome. That's fantastic.
That's
yes.
My ultimate goal with this in general is to get enough stories where the Supreme Court will take notice, and then we will be able to change the statute of limitation laws within the United States.
That is fantastic.
Yeah, that's
absolutely
really cool.
Fantastic. Yes.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Well, Mendy, I commend you. And
thank you.
Yeah. And thank you so much for joining us and for telling your story, for advocating for other survivors, for executing justice.
Giving up.
Yeah.
For not giving up. Yes. Keep on going.
That's one thing. My dad's military, and that's one thing that, it's a blessing and a curse to my parents. They raised two extremely strong-willed, outspoken don't take nothing off of anybody's children, which
That's
is to
good.
their detriment most of the time. But yeah, I won't roll over for anybody.
Good.
Yeah,
Good.
that is good.
I like that
I think
fire.
that's incredible.
I do.
Yeah, I do too. Well, thank you again for sharing your story with us.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, 100%. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in, and we'll catch you next round.
Thanks again for listening to today's episode. Thank you to our patrons who make the podcast possible. If you found it helpful, please follow on Spreaker and search for the Speaking Out on Sex Abuse podcast in your favorite podcast app. Be sure to hit subscribe and rate the show. If you believe in what we do, consider supporting the podcast by becoming a patron, and check out the cool rewards our patrons receive. Share with your friends and tell the world. Join us in speaking out on sex abuse so we can change the tides and prevent abuse.